Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of this RandomKandor show. My name is Random. I'll be your host for today. Today, a quite controversial subject matter in some circles, and that is the new Spider-Man No Way Home movie. So I went to go watch it with my girlfriend the other day. I'm gonna put some Spider-Man Miles Morales gameplay to the backing of this to discuss what really went down. I'm gonna open up the Wikipedia article. This is going to be a full-on spoiler review. So just straight off the bat, I think this is the second best Spider-Man movie ever made. I think that this movie marries what all eras of Spider-Man were all about. The Tobey movies, the Garfield movies, and kind of this Tom Holland, like mini Avenger Spider-Man. They made him into an actual worthwhile character that's not just some little witty mouthpiece and like, oh, I'm young as his character. They gave Tobey some redemption and some growth as like a senior member. And it's also kind of a wink behind the scenes of, I'm sure he was feeling a type of way about Spider-Man getting all this hype whenever he was the iconic face of it back in the day. He also gave Garfield some time to really say, hey, you know what? I tried, guys. I did my shit. They fucked me over and I don't get any grace. So let me get a little bit of meta humor and some of my grievances aired during this movie. So I'm just going to go through the Wikipedia of the summary now. So again, spoilers. It's your fault if you continue. So the movie picks up after Mysterio basically canceled Spider-Man for being a murderer or for killing him. Apparently the film or the footage was doctored and he was like, oh, Peter Parker killed me with the drones. So they get arrested. MJ and Aunt May have this little kind of strong woman moment. We're like, oh, don't tell them anything without a lawyer, which is fair. And it's something hopefully he's smart enough to know anyways. They have a cute little scene where the FBI guy kind of plays these mind games with Ned, his like fat Filipino best friend, of like, hey, he was supposed to be the smart one, so he's like, I'm clamping down, I'm not telling anything. And then he baited him by saying, oh yeah, well, when did MJ tell you? And he's like, well, actually, I knew way before MJ. So he kind of gets him that way. And then I think with Mary Jane, they're like, oh, you had so much potential, why would you throw it all away for this guy? And then she's like putting her, feminism identity against her practicalities of making these sacrifices for a guy. And she's like, I forget what they do with Aunt May, but they get her down. Then you have the like worry about MIT and all this kind of stuff. This Peter Parker, real big wig shit, getting into your university out of high school is the biggest moment of your life. Everyone always tells you, so much is riding about this. You'll never get a great job. You'll never get a great career if you don't get into the school that you want, especially something like MIT for these nerds. So it is a realistic, high-stakes thing for them. Meanwhile, for the average audience member, we realize, it doesn't matter that much. Yeah, things happen way in terms of career and stuff down the line. It puts you in a good position, but it's not life or death. Just like in the first movie, it's not life or death if your fucking crush goes out with you for prom. So it's that cool Spider-Man low-stakes thing going on, realistic for teenagers. Then he realizes they're getting literally canceled by the schools because of the Mysterio controversy and their association with Peter Parker now that his identity is known. So Spider-Man's feeling a type of way, being like, fuck, I fucked over my friends, they have loyalty to me. The best scene in the whole movie is Flash. When Flash comes up, he's like, yeah, I'm best friends with Peter Parker. He's the fucking best. And then later on, he's like, you know what I want. You know what I want. He's the best character, and that's not really just my bias as a brown man recognizing a fellow brown man's baseness. But then he saves the Princeton person on the bridge because he's like, oh, give them a chance. Forget about me. I'm selfless, yada, yada. And then Doc Ock comes out. Everyone's going crazy in the theater. Like, what the hell? He's from a different Spider-Man. They fight. Peter kind of makes short work of him from the nanotech from the Iron Man suit, which is a little bit cheap. But already we can see that this isn't his Spider-Man. Doc Ock actually seems a little more deranged in this than in the Spider-Man 2 movie. But then we get transported with Doctor Strange. He's like, yeah, you made this spell to try to save your friends, but you fucked it up because you're being too demanding and too selfish for the spell, or not just having your mind straight. So I guess kind of like a teenager, confused mind affected the spell, bringing that kind of core of Spider-Man into the applicability of the plot. Then, blah, 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 they have to catch all these other guys, and then finally they find Green Goblin, and he's all disheveled. He's in his like kind of homeless gear, begging for sympathy, and you're like, shit, man, really? He always was a little bit of a troubled guy. Like, maybe if he had the help in Spider-Man 1 instead of being isolated as like the rich kind of narcissistic guy, maybe there could be another option. So I like this idea of making them, the tragic villains. So then they're like, okay, well, let's try to help him. And Aunt May's like, yeah, like, we got to do what we can. You're Spider-Man. You can't sell out your personality and your own purity just because of the practicalities of these other adults telling you what to do, whether it's Iron Man or Doctor Strange, whatever. You got to stay true to you, which is a fair enough Spider-Man kind of thing to do. But they all get together. They're all like, all right, yeah, whatever, let's do it. They have a great scene where fucking Spider-Man has the spider sense going off like ambiguously, and he's like, what the hell's going on? I really like that. Even if you had anything spoiled for you, you kind of know, like, Green Goblin's not that sick, some shit's going down, he's still got a little bit too much evil in there. And he has a great a great movie stealing scene when he's talking to the Mask again, reprising that same dynamic he had in the first movie. And he finally smashes it, making you think, okay, shit, this guy's really with it. This guy's really conquered it this time. It's not just that back and forth kind of employing the pity party whenever it's necessary. So the villains are all kind of on the loose now at this point. They kind of escape from him. They get convinced by Green Goblin to be like, yo, fuck it, these are gifts, not curses. I don't need to be fixed, blah, blah, blah. Classic hero trope, or like mutant trope shit. Like, what's his name? Magneto. So then they're going around. Let's pick up where this shit is. They go to the Feast building, which is like this kind of homeless shelter type thing that's in Spider-Man 4, or Spider-Man PS4 for PS4. But I don't remember this ever being in any of the movies, so maybe this is the first time they're introducing that Spider-Man PS4 kind of universe into here, because it really does feel like it's a blend of like Spiderverse. They talk about Miles Morales and Spider-Man PS4, which also had a Doc Ock too. Unless they may have mentioned this in the past Spider-Man movies, but I just don't care that much about them. So then he battles Doctor Strange, where he's kind of using this simple geometry to beat up this neurosurgeon, or like suspend him in air so he can continue to try to fight for the humanity of these villains, which is a cute touch. And it does show, like, I'm sure there's some seething like nerds out there that are like, yeah, Doctor Strange is like 20 times the power level of Peter Parker. How could this be possible? But it's all about the scrappy, like, underdog Queens kid trying to beat these establishments and employing his ingenuity and flexibility of intelligence versus any kind of concrete specialization in, like, I don't know, like Tony Stark and fucking Hulk all have their own like little specialties, but Spider-Man's always been that general kind of this smart dude, not kind of a genius, but reasonable and flexible, and that's kind of where his intellectual prowess shines. So that was a nice touch, and plus it gives space for the movie to actually occur without being like, well, Doctor Strange should have just done this or that. So then they continue, and the kids try to find Spider-Man, Mary Jane, and Ned. And Ned finds out he can make the portals or whatever with the ring. And then the first Spider-Man they see is Andy Garfield, which is a great touch because, if they jumped to Tobey, then Garfield would have had less of a punch. And he's in the mask, so you don't know, is it Tobey? Is it some other Spider-Man? Blah, blah, blah. Takes it off, and then he has this kind of cute scene with Mary Jane being like, you should be able to believe me from just touching the ceiling. Like, why are you trying to force my hand? Mary Jane's kind of annoying with it, but whatever. And then they get Tobey, and Tobey comes back. They have these really cute scenes where they're talking about, oh yeah, my webs are organic, which was a funny thing from the first movie, if anyone remembers, everyone was saying, yeah, like the real Spider-Man has like cartridges and stuff, but this one, it just comes out of his wrist, doesn't make any sense, blah blah blah. But back in 2002, the nerd kind of culture didn't have that big of a stranglehold on mainstream, and no one really cared what they had to say, so they left it. But since then, people are always talking about that as a distinction between the Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield also kind of continues to employ that too cool for school attitude, that like really witty and like caustic wit, like when he's talking shit to Toby or being all self-loathing, saying, oh, I'm Spider-Man 3. Or you guys fought aliens, I only fought around. Like he's that fucking punk-ass hipster kid from the late 2000s, early 2010s. Which is nice to see a revisit of that. Toby's similarly kind of bland and kind of the affable, I guess, straight man to these kind of witty little hipsters. And that dynamic is really nice to see. It's nice to see both of them back and brought in not just for cameos, which a lot of us thought was going to happen. It was just like, okay, cool. But they were one of the biggest characters of the like movie. And in a way, a lot of their characterization got more fleshed out in this movie than the past, like their own trilogies or duologies in the past, which is really nice to see them get some legit screen time and character exploration and monologues versus just like the fan service cameos. There was a lot of fan service. Some of it was really cringe, like when Goblin said, I'm something of a scientist myself. It was like, oh, come on, like whatever. Some of the things were kind of funny. I forget when Electro has one of the best lines ever. He's just like, you guys gotta just pretend I'm not butt-ass naked. I laughed fucking loud as hell there. But they really let Jimmy Fox be Jimmy Fox and just riff on stuff, which was nice to see. Lizard didn't get much screen time, but probably didn't pay him much either. Sandman had a good level of dialogue because he was always like the third, like he was the first villain of the third movie, but he also felt like the kind of the worst one. Like Venom became kind of the more pressing villain, and then Green Goblin was kind of anti-hero and team up and all that. Even though Green Goblin should have been the kind of ultimate one, ties the trilogy together. Sandman was I guess the Uncle Ben killer, blah blah blah, bringing that into the fray again. But still, here, because they kind of ended on decent terms with Toby, he isn't as out for blood or anything like that. Doc Ock kind of gets fixed early on as a proof of concept that they can fix these guys, and he helps a lot with rounding up the other villains and providing a additional helping hand to the Spider-Man, which is nice to see, and a great use of Alfred Molina, who probably earned the most salary, because I know he's a very celebrated actor. Yeah, okay, so going on. Oh yeah, so then the biggest spoiler was Green Goblin killing Aunt May, who tells him the kind of original Stan Lee quote of, with great power there must also come great responsibility, and that initial proper wording, as they like to say, which is a nice shock because it also tells us that this Spider-Man has never really heard those words like fully. I think they mentioned it in the first movie, like, yeah, Uncle Ben used to say that, blah blah blah, but he hasn't had that origin story yet because he kind of hit the ground running as a high school young Peter Parker without the origin story in Captain America and Homecoming. But this movie, I think I've heard other people say this too, it really showed his growth, his loss, his sense of responsibility, a lot more gravity to him as Spider-Man and as Peter Parker, even towards the ending, which we'll talk about in a while too. But this really has elevated Tom Holland into an actual heavyweight Spider-Man versus the kind of Marvel sideshow, I think. So Osborn kills Aunt May, has a sick fight scene with Spider-Man too. Like he murks them. Well, they murk each other like pretty heavily. It was nice, heavy blows. Good to see. A lot of what do they call that? Catharsis in those fights. And he targets this Spider-Man, I guess, because he already tried to go after Mary Jane and Aunt May for Toby. So this one, he clearly identifies that this Aunt May girl is the one that's like poisoning him into being the goody-goody kid. He witnesses that, and he takes advantage of that in getting them to consider helping him in the first place. So he already knows that. That's kind of machinations working in his mind. And then he really identified, all right, this person is trying to spoil him and trying to kind of take advantage of him and put on her own morality onto him, which is what a parent figure is supposed to do. But by killing her, then he really affords him the best opportunity to try to make Spider-Man kill him and become like evil. He's basically the Joker killing that Batman's fucking Rachel Dawes. That's essentially what this was. But Toby and Andrew helped Tom Holland grasp with the gravity of it and saying, you know, we all lost somebody. I know it doesn't feel like you can understand, but we've all been through it, blah, blah, blah. There's some solidarity among the Spider-Men, which is a cute bromance element. Then they work in the science lab, which is a nice little bit about the Spider-Men working together and each having kind of smarts and experiences, bonding over their shared past and all that kind of stuff. And then finally Spider-Man, Tom Holland, bands together, uses his teamwork in Avengers to lead the team, even though he's like the youngest, but like 20 years at this point. And they beat up all the villains, they cure them, more importantly. And then finally he almost loses it on the Green Goblin, the classic. And then Toby just comes in and just holds the shield. He's like, nah, bro. I don't even think he says anything. He just looks at him. He's like, no. Which is fucking a beautiful moment. Tom Holland kind of tries to kill Toby for a second and then comes to grips. Toby gets stabbed by Green Goblin. I thought he was going to die. It felt a little cheap. Like they just wanted some gravity, wanted some sacrifice. So that even though Toby was trying to save Green Goblin, he's the one who got killed by him. I think that's the only scene that they share together, which is kind of sad, but still. And then finally they save everybody, and Tom Holland goes up to Doctor Strange, is like, hey, fuck it, you know, I was being really selfish before trying to save my two friends, but now let me just erase my whole existence. No one knows that Peter Parker even exists in the first place. Then can this be reversed? Doctor Strange is like, yeah, sure. I don't understand how that works, but whatever. It gives him the little sad sack story. And by the end of it, he's getting his GED. He's moving into Queens, in an apartment by himself. No furniture. He's really just being a sad boy, but serving the higher purpose of being a Spider-Man with his new suit, which looks amazing, I think. So that was kind of the summary of Spider-Man No Way Home. At the end, he goes to try to rekindle the romance with Mary Jane and reintroduce himself to Ned and try to get things back to how it was before. But he noticed that they both got into MIT and they were doing happy just without him, so why introduce more pain into them when he noticed the Band-Aid on her forehead saying, I did that. It's still not healed, these physical wounds. So it's a rude awakening for him to say that, hey, maybe another time, if at all. It's not all about me, Peter Parker. It's about the world, because I'm Spider-Man. So, what did I think of this movie? I think this movie was a solid, at least an 8 out of 10, maybe an 8.5. I think only Spiderverse was better than it in the Spider-Man movies. Spiderverse is easy 10 for me. But this similarly kind of had, you could pick up this movie and not care about any of the other ones, and it still had a, beginning, middle, end, resolution, payoff, and it also has a lot of fan service for people that are Spider-Man fans, even before Marvel MCU shit. Like, Spider-Man has always been one of the vanguard for superhero movies, entertainment, and pop culture, so it was rewarding in a lot of ways there. The humor isn't so, like, cringy Marvel. It's actually a lot of good, like, riffing and stuff. Like, Jamie Foxx's stuff is completely different from the Marvel-branded stuff. Same with Green Goblin, like, his expressions, all those kinds of things. Like, when Spider-Man's beating his face down, and he's just looking back happy as hell. Shades of Heath Ledger when he was just getting murked by Batman and just like liking it. And who else was really funny? Ned had a couple of kind of funny moments too, like that interrogation thing with the FBI. I definitely, me and my girlfriend laughed at a lot of things that other people didn't really pick up on, like a lot of like funny dynamics between characters and like awkwardness, I enjoyed. Alfred Molina had a couple funny lines too. Yeah, just amazing to see so many huge stars and charismatic individuals on stage at the same time, and they didn't feel like they were overpowering each other or trying to one up each other either. I think they kind of made Aunt May a little too sexy in this one, I feel like, but that's just me. Yeah, so essentially, Mary Jane or Aunt May got killed by the Green Goblin. Classic kind of pattern for him, so nothing surprising there, but it is trying to push this young, like, teenage Peter Parker from the Marvel universe into a really dark direction, or much darker. So it was a bit shocking for them to do that with this character. And it was kind of cool to see that permanence, or possible permanence, as much as the Marvel universe goes, in terms of Peter erasing himself from his friends' loved ones' lives after he lost Aunt May, who was his last family already. Now he's taking away all of his friendships, all his supports, which is pretty sad to see, but at the same time it adds a little bit more of that sacrifice element to Spider-Man, which he hasn't really had to do yet, right? So, and that's a really important part of Peter Parker Spider-Man dynamic, is that sacrifice, that personal kind of sacrifice for the greater good. So it's good to see them bringing that part of Spider-Man into Tom Holland's version. Obviously beautiful to see Tobey and Andrew Garfield back. Everyone's pushing for a third Andrew Garfield movie, which would be great. I think if they brought back fucking James Franco, that would have been amazing. When he talked about his son and all that, I think maybe his cancellation had something to do with that, and he would be commanding quite a big budget. But I know that was one of his biggest, like, launching acting roles, so maybe he would do it for a little bit less. I think he has beef with Tobey Maguire, so that might be something too, but that would have been amazing to see. Or Topher Grace would also be pretty funny, just to give him a little redemption like they did for some of the other characters. My main gripes are the excess fan service, as it is a bit like eye-rolling for a lot of the lines that they use. It's kind of cringe, but whatever. They have a lot of Marvel fans, and the Reddit community would have appreciated them. And they only take like 5 seconds each. Doesn't really spoil anything. I would be kind of cringe to make that much of a big deal about it. One of the other things is I feel like they involved Ned and Mary Jane just a little bit too much. Yeah, you want to amplify the sacrifice at the end of the movie, but at the same time, you have 3 Spider-Men there. You can focus more on them. You can talk about the multiverse stuff from Doctor Strange's side to build up that next movie. I think there was just a little bit too much of them. I'm happy they brought back Flash, because I feel like he hasn't been getting enough love, and he's a perfect fucking... He's a great casting, because already he's against type in terms of Flash being that big white fucking football player guy. Now he's like a little cyber bully, essentially. And then he just switches up right away, shows he has no real character just to benefit himself, which is funny. There's a lot of people like that out there. And... well, what else are negatives about the movie? It was decently long, but it was a lot to get through, so it wasn't too long. It was just ambitious, and I think it accomplished its goals. Happy was a little bit annoying too. Like, he does kind of tie the whole technology aspect to it, and like Spider-Man's I guess like connection to Stark from the Mysterio movie and all that kind of stuff. He was necessary to be there, but a little bit too much screen time, like not that funny. It's kind of, yeah, you got broken up with, cool, ha ha ha. Also a pretty big budget, I'm sure, like to have to pay fucking Jon Favreau must have cost a pretty penny that they could have put elsewhere. But I'm really happy with what they did with the Spider-Men. They actually gave them some good screen time and actual purpose to the plot, versus just like, hey guys, remember? Yeah, there isn't too many other cons I can think about. It does wrap up a little bit too darkly, especially knowing that it's Marvel, so they're gonna retcon a lot of this shit. They're gonna build him up so okay, next at the start of the next movie, he's gonna be completely fine. They have a bad habit of that. Even with Spider-Man, when they snapped him out of existence, okay, well he's back right away. So knowing that it's a Marvel movie, you kind of already attach that lightness to the consequences of this movie. It builds it up to be extra heavy, but you know, like, nah, they're not gonna just leave that. That's not them. So that kind of spoils it, even though it's good that they were trying to do that in the first place. Um, but yeah, basically, I think it was a great movie. One of the best ones, I think. Um, Besides Spiderverse. So we will see what my girlfriend thinks when we do that duo review in the near future, and I think we're gonna do a measly few talking about Spider-Man as well. So this was just my first kind of thoughts about the movie, and we will see how that changes or goes up against other people's opinions going forward. I've been Random Candor. You have been most excellent, beautiful, handsome, and charismatic audience, and we will see you in the next one. Please hit that like, subscribe, and comment what your favorite or least favorite part of Spider-Man No Way Home was. All the best. Happy holidays. Peace out.